So we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for coming. First order of business is an adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move we adopt the agenda.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. You have received minutes from our last meeting, that being June 25th. Does anybody have any corrections, or can we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Should we approve the minutes of publish?
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving right along. All right. I determined last month that having 4 items on our agenda was just too much because we never got to it. So we've truncated it somewhat, and the 2 main items on our lately have been tree ordinance and the solar panel ordinance. So those are the 2 items on today's agenda. Starting with a proposed amendment to our tree cutting ordinance. Jim Phelps did a lot of work in putting everything that we discussed at the last meeting on paper. And you've all had an opportunity to look at that. So does anybody have any questions about it? Or item corrections, statements, whatever? Okay, Jim?
On the first page, under section 12-188 definitions, if you go down to specimen tree,
Okay,
it says specimen tree means any tree or group of trees which have been determined by blank.
that came out of Hall County, and I think it probably said at that point, determined by Hall County, whomever.
Okay, well, I'd like to suggest that we put in the city manager and the building inspector.
Both, not either or.
No, because I'd rather have 2 sets of eyes on it, especially based on some of the tree permitting that's happened recently. There's been a little bit of contention on several issues, and I just would like to take that off the table to even be a problem.
Okay. Any other comments? Rebuttals? So is everyone in favor of that particular change? Okay,
And I have another one.
all right.
The next page, section 12-191, procedure for issuance of a tree cutting permit. If you'll go down to number 6, item B, applications for cutting, topping, trimming, or removing trees on another person's land will require that the landowner be a party to and sign on the application. Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But I had a situation yesterday, just yesterday, where a landowner over the years apparently has been giving a neighbor written permission, as the current ordinance reads, to cut trees on her property. Now that we're having the landowner be a signature on the application, she said going forward, she's not going to sign that. And I've talked to some other folks as well, and I've had 1 or 2 say the same thing. And the reason being, they don't want to incur any liability. So I'd like it to, I mean, we need a clause stating, I'd like to see that the applicant, not necessarily the landowner and contractor doing the work, are the ones liable for any damages that might occur. Obviously, the contractor has the insurance, but in this case, it's a little unique situation. I don't want to go too deep into it, but this is just an empty lot. But I want to bring that up in a moment.
I'm a little unclear.
Okay, we have an instance where someone wants to cut trees on this woman's property. Over the last 20 years, she said there's been probably 3 or 4 instances where she said, sure, no problem, our ordinance reads, as long as they have written permission from her, that they can do it. Okay, she's fine with that. In fact, she's already given us permission yesterday. But going forward, as Jim Phelps and all of us concurred in the last meeting, it says applications, for cutting, topping, trimming, and removing trees on another person's land will require that the landowner be a party to and sign the application, which I'm all for. But I'm saying maybe we put something in there specifying that depending upon who the applicant is, they and the contractor are the responsible party. If there's any issues, this lady as the homeowner, she doesn't want to sign anything that's going to cause her to be liable.
How does she figure the application is gonna change her liability versus a written letter?
Well, she doesn't, that's why she's saying she's not gonna do it unless we change the way it's written. I mean,
Mr. Lawyer.
yeah, we need some legal advice.
Well, I jotted down, what we have written is application for cutting, topping, trimming, and removing trees on another person's land will require that the landowner be a party to and sign the application. Then I added, I don't, for discussion, but provided, however, that the landowner and the contractor performing the cutting work shall be solely responsible therefore.
You're saying the landowner and the contractor, not the applicant.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what she doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
I was suggesting that we.
Oh, no,
the
I'm
applicant,
sorry.
the applicant,
Okay.
the neighbor that wants to cut
The
the trees.
landowner, yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do
Um,
we have the authority to dissolve her of responsibility?
No, and that's a good legal question.
Yeah, I don't think we
Yeah,
did.
so but I'm not the one. So, I think so.
Yeah, I didn't need that landowner. Yeah, so let me rethink it.
I mean, I like the way it's written.
I think it should stay the way it's written. I kind of do too, because if you give somebody permission to come on your property and they fall in a hole that you dug yesterday and break their leg, then, it doesn't matter about the tree. So if they were there to cut a tree, you can say, well, I'm not responsible because you were on my property to cut trees.
That's why contractors, as per this ordinance, are required to have $1 million liability.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're lawful to also have workers' comp.
The homeowner could be involved in a lawsuit too, whether or not the contractor had insurance. So I don't think that we can absolve her from her responsibility.
I understand where she's coming
Yeah,
from, but
just
sure.
because she doesn't.
Yeah.
Be party to it,
But she can just say no, you
Yeah.
cannot,
Yeah,
and then she's not liable, or it ain't gonna happen.
Well,
Yeah.
basically, that's what she said. Pardon me?
I was just making a statement that if Sharon let me borrow her car and I wrecked it, it would still be in her insurance as owner. I don't know how you would absolve the liability.
But she specifically said she didn't want to be responsible for $1,000 tree fine, right?
No, she wasn't talking about fines, she was talking about liability.
Well, this is behind the scenes. She also, that was another issue. She said, hey, if the contractor cuts down more trees than he's supposed to, I don't want to be responsible for up to $1,000 a tree fine, which I told her she wouldn't in this specific case. But the main thing was the liability. So, but I'm fine with the way it's written. This is an isolated case. I mean, there could be some more, but I wanted to put it out on the table.
What's wrong with the old way, where we got a letter?
Because all we require is permission, and we've had some issues where the permission wasn't given, even though we were under the impression that it was. And now, there's no possibility of an error if we've got the signature of all three, the owner, the one that wants the trees cut, and the contractor.
I think there was a misunderstanding between the person's property and the neighbor wanted to cut trees. The neighbor said, yes, go ahead. And then when it was all done, it wasn't understood that they were gonna take out more trees and it was just a big mess.
That was another issue.
That was another issue. So
This will just make it transparent, clean. I mean,
So-
it's one more step, but it's not that big of a deal. All we need is a signature.
but is she still she or he still liable?
Well, that's,
What about putting in an or? What about saying that it has to sign on the and or produce a copy of the permission letter? I mean, obviously, there's something in this person's head, and I agree with Dan that, you know, that the liability isn't gonna get absolved and just like
sure.
you said, but you could put an or that you produce this permission letter. Because then the person doesn't have to, what if they're in, you know, Timbuktu and you have to get the letter to them and then they have to
Well,
sign?
yeah, I'll give you an example of somebody being in Timbuktu, paraphrase. Jason and I happened to be, the city manager and I were up on a property owner's land a few weeks ago. And same thing, for years, this is the way they've been doing it. He was the applicant, he's the one that wanted to cut the trees on someone else's property. And we said, what, we need, under the current rules, a notarized permission, because I don't know who this person is, Jason didn't know who this person was. So we actually, on site, got the person on the phone. She texted us a copy of her driver's license, you know, we verified that that was the owner of this address. And we were able to notarize it just because we had that. And the gentleman was able to go ahead and have the trees cut on her property. So I mean, that, you know, there's so many different variations
There are.
here.
So to make this so black and white, and I just.
Well,
think-
but again, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate, this is just what was brought to my attention. If we get the contractor, the landowner, and the applicant, and if you look at the application, there's room on all three for those signatures.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal, I mean, with,
Well, it is
you know,
if
with
the person's
emails and
out of
text
town.
messages, well, everybody's, well,
Yeah.
I won't say everybody, but texting and email is pretty prevalent, and it's not. So as it is right now, and a lot of people don't understand this, I've got 10 days to approve something, and then if whoever I'm approving or disapproving for doesn't like my decision, they've got another 5 days for Jason to make a decision.
Right.
So everybody wants everything done now, so surely in 15 days, we'll be able to get a hold of somebody in Timbuktu unless they're, you know, in the Himalayas in a monastery or something.
Well, then you're not gonna get a written letter from them anyway. We had this discussion at our last meeting, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically it was determined that if you're available to sign a letter saying, yes, go ahead and cut the trees on my property, you're also available to sign the application.
Well, obviously, this woman doesn't like that, even though it's not gonna absolve her of the liability. I mean, I'm just
Right.
trying to
Well, yeah,
be
and
not so hard about it.
she's not absolved of the liability just by sending a letter, right?
No, I know that, that's what I'm saying, but she doesn't obviously feel that way.
I gave permission to cut trees on my property. I wrote a letter, well, it was not topping, crowning trees. And I wrote a letter and signed it and dated it, and I don't see what's needed beyond that.
It's just a different piece of paper. I mean, you could just as easily have signed the application as signed that letter.
I suppose, but if they are in Timbuktu, it's got to be mailed, returned. I mean, you can't.
Well,
do that
as the
by
mayor just
scan.
mentioned, though, we did have an instance here a few months ago where somebody gave permission and the trees were cut on the wrong property, which was a whole different can of worms. But
And that's-
I mean, you'd be surprised how many different variations there are in something you would think would be so simple. But anyway, that was the point she wanted me to bring and. so, back to
Well,
you, Mr. Chair.
we don't have the ability in this committee or the city council either one, to create an ordinance that absolves somebody of liability.
No, absolutely not.
So
All right,
then I say, leave it, don't change it.
I agree.
You
Okay,
agree?
I agree. One more, actually two more.
Can I ask a general question? I asked earlier how I get a copy of this to review it before this meeting. I was told, come to the meeting. So is there no way for us to get the proposed changes?
Yeah, aren't those posted? When the meeting notice went out,
Post-
didn't that
Where
go
the
with?
minutes? It was not, we don't post the minutes?
Then we're approved,
Oh,
so nothing was supposed to,
Yeah.
except information we met and this meeting would happen.
I'm just going back to a few years ago where we had that debacle where it was a really poor document was produced. Yes, Steve remembers well. And that's why I'm here today. I just don't want to see something like that happen again. So I'd like to have seen it ahead of time.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't, and I didn't realize that you couldn't access that, but, yeah, you're certainly welcome to it, and,
Well,
This-
for
this
today, we'll go like
this won't be
this.
approved till it goes to the council anyway, so you got some time to review it and make comments, but yeah, we'll get that to you. I'd like a copy too. Yeah, $5.
Okay, the next page. The next page, is section 12-194, new construction. If the building location is changed from the original footprint submitted to the building inspector after trees have been cut, topped, or trimmed, it will be considered violation of this article, and it continues. The question, and I know that this is addressed vaguely later on in the clear cutting, but what about trees on a vacant or empty parcel? I've got an instance where somebody wants to come in and do some cutting on an empty parcel. There's not, again, vaguely, it says something on clear cutting. My understanding, up until now, it had to be new construction. You couldn't just come in and buy a lot and say, okay, I'm gonna cut down some trees and improve the view so I can flip this lot, and this is a question as much as a statement. So what about a parcel, that's empty? I mean, there's nothing on it.
well, that wouldn't be affected by this particular section anyway. This one only deals with new construction. But then, again, you're talking about clear cutting or what have you, any of that applies to any lot.
But again, we're not talking clear cutting, that was a category that it fell under. I'm talking about, I bought a lot, this is, just theory. Buying a lot, I wanna come in and cut down some trees, I'm gonna leave a nice canopy, but I want a park-like setting. What is the rule? Anywhere in the ordinance. I was just saying, if we're gonna revise the tree ordinance, we should probably address that issue.
Wouldn't that be covered just under the general application for cutting trees? You're limited to,
25%.
Yeah.
25%, yeah.
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it doesn't say that in there, and I'd be remiss in just assuming it, so.
I would say yes, it does apply to vacant lots, the
I
25%.
understand so, yeah, I think so.
And
Should we possibly put something in there?
it's actually a little more restrictive because there's no house footprint to deal with.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
strictly the 25%. Steve,
Simple addition, just included in the paragraph he's talking about, parentheses, including vacant lots.
well, the paragraph he's talking about is
Under new construction.
it's under new
Yeah.
construction and talking about what happens if you clear from the footprint of your lot
Yeah,
or for your house and then change the footprint. So that doesn't apply there. But,
that's somewhere.
but, it doesn't exclude vacant lots when we're talking about the 25% rule.
Thank you. And then lastly, still under clear cutting, 12-195 B3. Underbrushing or selective cutting of a small group of small trees was removed, the words. And I was gonna suggest, rather than remove it entirely, could we possibly modify it to say trees less than 8 inches in diameter? And then the reason I'm mentioning it, it's just this weekend, past weekend. There was a gentleman doing some underbrushing, and there were some small trees up there. I mean, we're talking very small. I mean, you could either say, okay, that falls under selective cutting, because I mean, it does say that as long as they have a permit and we can approve it. But rather than just remove it entirely, I mean, small trees is kind of vague, but just anything under 8 inches, because 8 inches is where you know, we have a fee and schedule.
Yeah. But you get these little suckers that come up all the time.
Yeah, especially the poplars. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's like weeds. Nice shade tree.
But terribly invasive trees. You telling me every time I take out a 1-inch poplar tree, I've got to come get a permit?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Quite the contrary.
Leave that in there. You don't.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
And
And in fact, remember, it's the 10-foot by 10-foot square, you know, again, it's up to our discretion. You can take, it can be a larger footprint than that, depending upon your neighbor's requirements and the setback and visibility. There's a lot of factors.
But what you're saying, you do need a permit for that.
It says, yes, may be allowed with a permit, and I'm not wanting to change that, leave that. And that's underbrushing even. Now, I mean, obviously with trees, you can trim trees up to 12 feet. Once you go above 12 feet, you have to have a permit, but below 12 feet, you don't,
Or they're less than 8 inches.
or less than 8 inches, but it doesn't say that, it doesn't say that, so. Again, I want to make sure while we're doing this, that we tweak it, so we don't have to come back. and do
No, I
this again.
understand that.
Doesn't the ordinance say that the trees under consideration for a permit are those greater than 8 inches in diameter?
Well, greater than 8
Yeah.
inches in diameter, there's a fee,
That's in definitions.
yeah.
I might also add, you might use, what is it, ID? And come up with a diameter of a tree, so a property owner can easily determine whether or not it's 8 inches. They're trying to figure 8 inches is a moving target when you're trying to measure. a tree.
Well, to get a permit, you're supposed to go through the permitting office, and I've actually got a little device that my
Yeah.
predecessor left me, and I've got a couple of them. And I can actually go out, it's a horseshoe. You just go up and put it up against the tree. If it goes around the tree, it's less than 8 inches. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, it's 1 to 5 trees, $100 fee, if you're allowed to cut that tree down.
Yeah.
so you want to add the definition.
Well, it was already in there.
Small tree.
It's in the
It's in
existing,
there.
it's in the existing.
He's
Okay.
just suggesting, don't
We
take
put
it
it
out.
out.
Okay,
They just removed the small trees. And I said, put it back, except, you know, say that small trees or just trees, you don't have to say small, less than 8 inches in diameter. I mean, it's semantics, but it's a little more specific. But other than that,
Anyone else? You all in agreement? Don, Tony?
And around my house, under my deck, small trees come up. You know, it was cleared, remember the fire people came years ago, cleared so much behind your house.
Yeah.
Small trees come up. It's, I have to get a permit to have those small trees,
Only if it's greater than 8 inches in diameter.
but that just says
That's why it's changed.
select
Well, that's-
cutting of a group of small trees. And I'm talking, you know.
that's why you say put it 8 inches.
yeah, this is the way it reads now. This is
Yeah.
without even changing.
And
And
then
if we
this
put
is-
in, you know, smaller than 8 inches, then That's up to the rest of the, the
Or larger
city
than
council, but larger than 8 inches.
Let me- Why is that paragraph in there anyhow, paragraph 3?
Because we have a lot of people that, like I said, just this past weekend, they say, hey, I wanna clear out all this stuff, maybe they've been gone for a couple of years, or they didn't pay attention to it, and like the poplars and other stuff. And we're not talking rhododendrons and laurels and the native, but just stuff you've seen after a good rain, I mean, they go inches. And they come up and say, you know what, I'd like to kind of clear this out a little bit. It's not a canopy, I mean, you may have something this tall, you just wanna go out there and get rid of it. So, you know, I mean, we can talk about changing it and not having to have a permit for something like that. It'd make my job easier, and it'd make the residents' jobs easier, so that they wouldn't have to question, wow,
To my mind, that's just maintenance.
It is.
I call it landscape.
Yeah,
When
why-
people ask me that, it's landscape.
Why does that paragraph even need to be in there? I mean, because if all you're doing is underbrushing, and you're taking care of a fire hazard too. I did some a couple of days ago, and I realized, and I probably did more than 10 by 10. Although it's on a slope like this, so I quit fairly quickly, but,
Write him up, yeah.
It needs to be there because the paragraph says, clear cutting and the removal of native vegetation shall be prohibited except as, and then that's one of the exceptions.
oh, okay. Is that an exception?
Yes.
Oh, I stand corrected. I don't, okay.
But again, if we put something in there so that it's so clear, you can't misread it. Greater than 8 inches, okay, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it's an exception, why do you need a permit?
You have to ask the people that wrote it originally.
Yeah, that is in the current ordinance.
But I question, if it's an exception, why should you have a permit? And if you're leaving stuff greater than 8 inches, by definition, you should have a sufficient canopy and cover.
I think a lot of that goes to, the bottom of, 3 there, where it says, as long as a sufficient canopy and cover is left.
Yeah.
Okay, that will be subject to the city going out and doing an inspection and contacting the neighbor. Because personally, I don't want somebody clear cutting the brush right up to my property.
And that's why the 10 by 10 is in there, because I've got one right now where I actually had to call the contractor yesterday and say, you need to stand down until I can come out. And I talked to the city manager about it. I said, in this particular location, this must have happened 40 years ago.
Yeah.
All the trees are gone, but there's a buffer between this property owner and the one down below him of probably 10 to 15 trees. So if I allow him to cut these down, I don't know, and that's something we discussed in the last meeting. We don't know how many trees were there originally,
Yeah.
going back 40 or 50 years, but right now, there's maybe 10 or 15 trees and he wants to cut 7.
Yeah.
Well, what does his neighbor have to say about that? Because it's gonna be clearly visible from his neighbor's house. They're gonna be looking at each other now,
Yeah.
and that's the buffer.
I've got a similar situation, my next door neighbor. Since he's been there, which has been 5 or 6 years. He's got permits to cut his trees, but he's got nothing but grass, and now this is up on, on Pleasant Mountain, so there's a considerable slope there, it's not like in the valley where it was that way to begin with. And he didn't get a permit, and now it's virtually all grass. And what we're saying is he should have gotten a permit to do that. Well, I've got a lot of underbrush down there, and you're saying, now, do I have to pay $100 for the privilege of cutting underbrush? Then that, if it says permit, then that ought to say that, no cost. Then
I'm still over there. I mean, my yard guy comes once a year, twice a year, under my deck where the little ones come up, they're that tall. And cuts them down.
I'm not gonna ask you,
They're not-
I'm not gonna ask you for a permit application for that.
Under 8 inches.
No, that's covered by, number 2 there. protect the home ignition zone. There's no permit
Oh,
necessary.
okay.
It's fire-wise.
Yeah, you're right. Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so I guess I need to put that out and read it.
Karen, Sharon will put it out on our website so that you all can review it once we get through today. Okay? Thank you for bringing that up. She doesn't have anything else to do. No, she'll put it up.
All right.
And, you know, I mean, based on that, the underbrushing, maybe we decide you don't require a permit for that. I mean, if all we're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
is,
we're talking about landscape maintenance is
Right.
really all that is.
right, so the way it's written now, you wouldn't even have to mention the trees in there.
So you're suggesting take out with the permit, but.
Yeah,
Trees on as well.
Well, if it's just underbrushing, and, you know, we probably should define exactly what does that mean as far as trees, you know, shrubs. But, I mean, I've got an area, ever since I've had my house 15 years, and from day one, I've got a guy that comes and regularly keeps it manicured just so that it doesn't grow up. Because you know how fast it's gonna grow. Like you said, if you go a year, maybe 2 years, I mean, then you're gonna be calling us, do I need a permit? And the way it's written now, you might. So maybe we separate underbrushing and, you know, I don't know, I personally don't think we should require a permit for just clearing landscaping and maintenance work.
So I agree.
I too agree.
I do too. All right, I got two things here in my mind. First, we need to define the word underbrushing.
Yes.
And second, we're removing with permit. Just, that may be allowed
As,
As-
leave it as long
as
as,
sufficient.
yes, I would certainly agree with that.
Maybe include the term small trees in your definition of less than 8 inches.
We could certainly do that. So we're leaving small trees in there?
So less than 8 inches.
That
In
allows you
diameter.
to cut mountain laurel.
No, it says,
It says native shrubbery. And this is an exception to the do not cut mountain laurel.
Mount Laurel protected in another section, I think.
yes, it
But
is.
this is I thought this was an exception to the prohibiting of cutting mountain laurel.
And we put that excluding native shrubbery, but you're gonna have some rhododendrons that are 20 feet high.
That's not underbrush.
No, I know, but, the way it's written now. It says right here, just on A, we're on 3. On A, it says, it should be the policy of the city that native shrubbery and undergrowth such as mountain laurel, rhododendron, rare wildflowers, ferns, etc., shall be preserved insofar as practical and reasonable in order to retard surface runoff and soil erosion and protect their native species.
Yeah, but, and B itself reads, I'm sorry, if you run it back up. Clear cutting and the removal of native vegetation shall be prohibited except.
Exactly.
And that's an exception, number 3.
Non-native,
It says the native shrubbery in number 3.
Like the city manager just suggested, non-native shrubbery.
Yeah.
Well, you still want to be able to cut out the native shrubbery if it's not growing under your deck. That's
And it
gotta-
says we're practical, so again, I guess, who defines what's practical, so.
Mhm.
Again, this is the way it's written now, we're trying to be practical.
I never cut mountain laurel.
So Jim, your proposal would be to under 3B3, underbrushing of selected cutting of approved trees less than 8 inches in diameter, and then to strike with a permit.
Yes,
That would satisfy.
I think so.
And I think that would,
Well, what that does, I mean, that negates the 10-foot area, because then everything's permitted. Because this is in excess of 10 feet, so anything.
Well, but it
under 10 feet
says-
would
But
be
it does
permitted.
say, Tony, as long as sufficient canopy and cover
yes,
is left as a sizable buffer between the area cut in a public right of way or adjacent property owner. I mean, somebody could be overzealous and cut more than they're supposed to between their neighbor and themselves, but
Well, the good news is, if you're talking about underbrush and small stuff, it's gonna come back anyhow, whereas when you're cutting big trees, that's an entirely different issue. So. That becomes a temporary problem.
right.
Donna,
Well, like this, sorry?
what Don just said, and I agree with, is the way it's written, except put in the less than 8 inches in diameter and take out the permit.
okay.
And
Yeah, I don't have a problem with
add the
that.
definition of underbrush. Back at the beginning.
Yes.
While y'all are writing the additions, Don, once you all get through with our next edition, number 42, on this ordinance, would you send it to Sharon so that she can post it for people to review before our next meeting? If you don't mind, thank you.
Okay,
What did we decide? How are we
we're taking
defining
out with
underbrush?
we're taking out with a permit, and we're gonna have to define underbrushing. I just might let Webster do that for me.
The very last thing I have, I promise. In the minutes that we approved. In the last meeting added, he would like to see verbiage like that by Hall County to protect trees by prohibiting damage done by chemicals, comma. That's the sentence. Well, and Dan and I talked about this. The attachment from Hall County goes into great detail. As far as the specifics, we can get into that, but certainly I would like to see something specifically saying killing or damaging trees intentionally, and then we can elaborate on how that might occur. But we had an instance a few months ago that the police were called, I was called, City Hall was called, where it appeared that a tree had been intentionally killed, a 60-foot white oak. And there were just a lot of issues. So we need something in here. We don't have anything in there specifically right now that says you can't kill that. Well, we had no way of proving except for someone took a chainsaw
But
around the
then
base of
this-
the trees.
Doesn't this say that damage prohibited? No
It
person
does.
shall cut?
Yes, Hall County, yes.
I mean,
I'm just
anything
saying, but you
wrong,
don't want to incorporate the entire ordinance, do you?
could.
This isn't the entire ordinance, but it's.
No,
it's
just,
the- It's the protection of existing trees portion of the ordinance.
I think it's a good,
Yeah, I,
everything in there is,
Well, okay, yeah, fence required during excavation, filling, construction, demolition.
talking about cutting the trees, girdling the trees, chemical, burning them, et cetera. So it, pretty well covers it.
Okay, I mean, I think it's more than,
but
it is, but
it's good, yeah, I think.
I'd rather have more than less.
Yeah,
So are we all in agreement that that portion of the Hall County ordinance is a good addition?
yes.
Tony, I'm not hearing from you.
You know, I don't have a problem with that, Dan.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? We've heard from Jen. So, at this point, we've got a couple of changes to make, but are we all in agreement that these changes, including the ones we made today, should be incorporated and that we would move this along to the city council?
I have one more question.
Mhm.
One of the issues 2 years ago was crowning versus topping. And haven't been able to read it, what I did said topping. And then I think crowning is an excellent thing to have. It's a much better way to top your trees. Is there any discussion about putting that in?
No, we never got into that. We were trying to address some specific issues that the city has had over the last several months. That's what we discussed.
I think it's a relatively simple thing to use the term crown rather than top.
Would you help me understand the difference?
Well, topping trees, you come in and you do this.
Right.
Crowning is specific to the tree and a central section is cut out and then the limbs on either side of it are trimmed to a level. It's healthier for the tree. It was a big issue.
We got into all kinds of things like drop crotch pruning and
Yeah.
just, there was all kinds of stuff involved there.
I don't remember that.
And that probably doubles or triples the cost of topping the tree.
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, you
It
know,
shouldn't.
I mean, if you've got a, if this is a tree, rather than just slicing off the top of all these branches, what you do is you take, you've got a central branch and any pruning that you do has to occur at a crotch in the tree. So
Yeah.
it's better for the tree.
It's selective cutting.
So it is
Selective
selective
trimming.
cutting.
Well, you're right from that perspective. I mean, if you go back to the trunk, yeah, you're right. That's not that much different.
And quite frankly, when you do it that way, the tree doesn't grow back as fast.
Yeah.
It,
And then the tree people that I've talked to said, oh yeah, we do, that's just what we do because of the issue.
because they're arborists and know how to do it, right?
The good ones automatically do that.
To answer your question, no, we did not address any of that. We were trying to address the problems the city has had.
The application
Last, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say the last time that we went through all that and adopted, at the legislative committee level, we adopted a new ordinance, moved it on to the city approved it, and then it all got tossed out by the next council.
It was a bad document.
Currently, the way the application and also the ordinance reads is trees to be cut, trees to be topped, trees to be trimmed. 99.9% of the contractors, when you say topping, if you say crowning, that's topping to them. They don't know the difference. You know, you're trying to explain it to them and they're synonymous to them.
And I don't think we need to differentiate. Really.
So, yeah.
I don't think we need to differentiate and say crown specifically, because I think that's included within what you've got.
It says specifically on the application, topping is discouraged, highly discouraged. Ask us why. And I explained it to the best of my ability when I'm talking to the contractor, talking to the homeowner. Because I've seen some people just come in and just whack the
Yeah,
tree and
that's
it
why
dies
the
a few years
crowning
later.
Needs to be in
So-
there because that is a specific.
But again, I'm not gonna allow the permit if I know that they're intentionally gonna go in and just whack off the top of the tree. That's not to say that they're not gonna do it, but then there's penalties for that. But I agree with Don. I mean, if we start getting too far in the weeds, you're making a very good point.
Yeah,
But
I get
it's-
what you're saying. but, you
It
know,
behooves me, when I'm allowing the permit, to explain to these people, what they should be doing. I'm not an arborist, so I'm not an expert. I've met a couple in the last year doing this. And, you know, they would be more than happy to come out, but again, somebody mentioned earlier, it's gonna get more and more expensive. But again, the cost of keeping our beautiful forest, you know, how do you put a price on it?
The city used to have some brochures.
Well, I was just
Showed the difference.
I've got some brochures here and I was trying to, it didn't specifically say crowning, but I think, but I do have ways to cut conifers, you know, all the indigenous trees up here. Pruning, but it doesn't say specifically crowning, but it does show you basically what crowning is. It's just different semantics. And I carry this with me every time I meet with somebody cutting a tree and try and show them, you know, follow the bound, you know, connect the dots and follow the bouncing ball.
It depends on who you get to cut them.
Well, and that's true too. That's true too. Fortunately, I'm fluent in Spanish, and so I can negotiate with her or talk to all of them. I'm serious, but yeah, it does depend. I mean, you know, some of them that only speak Spanish are some of the best, you know, tree trimmers around.
Like the last ones I had were Spanish, and he said that's all I do.
Yeah.
And did a beautiful job.
And most of the time, in my experience so far, you know, residents, they want to do the right thing. But we've had some instances where they don't care. The rules don't apply.
I think like you say, a lot of them don't understand.
I make a motion that we accept what we have here with the changes that we made, plus the additional definition of underbrushing, and move it on to the council.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right. Next item on the agenda. Solar ordinance. Let me begin this by saying that we are not opposed to having solar panels. Alternative forms of energy are encouraged. But we do want to be able to get ahead of it and have some controls so that you don't have solar panels sticking up willy-nilly anywhere in the valley. So we have a proposed ordinance here, which is largely based on the Georgia Model Solar Zoning Ordinance, which was created by Georgia Tech and the University of Georgia and deals with current laws within Georgia. You all have seen a copy of this proposed ordinance. Do we have any questions, comments?
I thought it was quite good.
I agree. I think it's a good basic proposal for us.
I agree as well, but I do have a question, if I may.
Okay.
Under integrated solar energy system, SES, solar materials are incorporated into the building material and it goes on. And you get below that, rooftop solar energy system means an SES that is structurally mounted to the roof of a house, building, or other structure does not qualify as an integrated SES. Well, that brings me to my question. If you read ground mounted solar energy system, any solar canopy that does not qualify as an integrated SES shall be considered a ground mounted SES regardless of where it's mounted. And then the very last thing in this, it says ground mounted SES shall not be permitted within the boundaries of Sky Valley.
Right.
So am I reading that a rooftop system does not qualify as an integrated and therefore it's not allowed?
I think there's a difference in definition.
Well, that's what I thought needs a clarification on. Because it almost appears to counter each other, you know, so.
Well, of course, the whole purpose of the prohibition on ground mounted is so that we don't have somebody coming in when they want to clear the lot, set up a ground mounted solar array, and in lieu of the trees and so forth.
Sure.
The rooftop systems would be allowed. And in my mind, the integrated solar energy system is one, companies like GAF who make shingles, now making shingles that are little solar panels. And they build them right into the roof.
And it mentions that shingle, skylight, canopy lights, but again, it says rooftop is, if you look at it highlighted there, does not qualify as one of these, and if it doesn't qualify as one of those, it's not allowed. I mean, I agree with you, and I'm all for rooftop solar panels, I'm just saying it appears the way this is written.
It's not allowed.
And again, it's plagiarized right off of here, so.
Yeah,
Well, the state could not be wrong.
it wouldn't be integrated because it's on the ground. I mean, it's just separate, completely separate. Integrated means it's part of the building itself.
Right.
I don't know the concern.
I mean, I'm fine with that, if that's the way you read it, I just wanted to make sure that I
That's
was.
the way I would read it.
Yeah. Because I mean, I read through the integrated and I
You know,
understand.
I think the deal is that the rooftop solar energy system and the ground mounted solar energy system both are not integrated systems.
Right.
It just happens to be the ground mounted one that's not an integrated system will not be permitted.
Okay, I'm good with that, thank you.
Okay. You agree, Counselor?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else from anybody?
I got a couple.
Okay,
Is there anything, and I have not read this, kudos to you for being able to plagiarize any county in any state at any time.
this model was actually done for the purpose of communities plagiarizing it.
I'm glad you took advantage of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything in there that states how much of the roof can be covered by your solar panels?
I'd have to go back and look at it again.
I didn't see.
I didn't see that.
I didn't either.
What difference does it
Why
make?
would you ask the question?
A little firefighter, we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to hear you say.
I'm just wondering,
You don't want to trip over solar panels when you're on
I don't
someone's
worry
roof?
about tripping over solar panels, I worry about getting on the roof. There's been instances in this country where firefighters have not been able to get on the roof because it's completely covered with a solar panel.
All right.
Is there a fire department recommendation? Ken?
I can't plagiarize anybody else, I can only go by what, has been recommended, to the fire service. And that is at least 3 areas where you can go from eave to the peak, 3 foot wide on either end of where the panels are mounted. So we can at least get up on either side. They had a house burned down, because firefighters couldn't get up, it was a simple chimney fire, they couldn't put the chimney fire out, because they couldn't get on the roof. They went through the attic, and the attic and the solar panels went away.
Would you mind sending some verbiage that would describe that so that we could, instead of putting that in this order? That would be great,
Or recommend where we could find it.
yeah, yeah,
I don't have any problem with plagiarizing, it got
Yeah.
me through high school.
right.
But,
Put that in the minutes.
I would really- It explains a lot, I know. But I would really like, instead of saying, hey, this is the way everybody else is gonna call county and land and all this, that. Personally, it sounds like a lazy way to get out of doing the job, but it would be nice if we could add something to it that would protect our firefighters.
Good, good.
Yeah, I have no problem.
About other firefighters, I care about the ones here in Sky Valley.
I have a question for you. Can you walk on the integrated shingle type?
If we know they're there. Normally, we're gonna put a ladder up, and we can use the ladder as a set of stairs. We can't put them over the top of these, especially the Volteric ones, because
That makes sense.
most of the time there's glass covering it, and 2, we don't particularly want to fall into something that is generating electricity half of the day.
I understand that.
Which brings me to my second point. Is there anything in this that says there is a shunt switch to shut these things off in case of emergency?
Good idea.
Where would a shunt switch be, inside or outside?
It'd be, it could be either, as long as we know it's there, but it has to be on ground level. Wouldn't make any sense to have to climb up on.
The same concept as your cutoff switch on your main power.
Right. Is that normally what they do for these things?
Wouldn't be a bad place to put it.
True.
There have been instances of firefighters killing the power to the building, fighting the fire, and getting zapped because the solar
Because it's-
panels don't
right.
know.
Because the
They turn
battery
power
system's
off.
working.
That's a different system.
At nighttime, it's fine. Find out, it really doesn't do a whole lot at night.
It just lights up the firefighter, is that what you mean?
It'll light up the firefighter, yeah. They've had, there's instances where two of them got thrown off a roof because it shorted out to the metal roof that this thing was mounted on.
Right.
And, you know, we bring a little water to these things sometimes, and water and electricity on a metal roof, good way to die.
I can appreciate that. All right. Anybody else? Okay, I think basically we're in agreement with this, but we've got some other things to look at, look into.
I'll bring it back at the next meeting.
I will bring it back at the next meeting.
And then hopefully you can come and make sure that it is what it needs to be. Okay.
If I come up with something, or you come up with something, we will stay in
I
communication.
had made a comment one time when I first got into this, and this was taken from some of those that, this just a line, but it said setbacks for roof edges must be as defined in fire codes to ensure firefighters have safe and quick access to the roof. And that's partly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we need to probably define it some more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably so, but.
Yeah.
would you, with that paragraph? Okay, yeah,
Just as a suggestion that in commercial restaurants, for example, that I've had in Florida, when we had anything like what the chief is talking about, you got to register that. I physically had to go to the fire department and hand them a piece of paper and say, this is what special thing I have, and there's a box, here's the key, here's the code, the combination, and they would know that if there was a fire at one of my Checkers restaurants, that they had to go there and they were all aware of it. So they go, they have their own code, they have a key to the door in that box, they have the shut off switch, they've had all those things to preclude any incident like he was talking about.
That's
So,
part of the Knox system.
yeah.
We've got here, and just nobody seems to want to take advantage of it, so.
We have,
A lot of municipalities have put in their ordinances for this, that no rooftop voltaic cells will be installed without the fire department's knowledge and permission. I have no problem with it. Okay, absolutely no
Yeah.
problem. We-
but you need
You
to
just
know.
need to know.
Right.
yeah, we want to create another problem here, so. These are points well taken.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else? Do we have anybody online with any questions? Okay. Next meeting. Shall we consider?
Nice.
Is August 27th.
That's the court date.
Not at 1 o'clock in the
Not
afternoon.
what's, well.
What time's court over? Jackson?
It's usually 12.
Okay.
I mean, that's just, that's a month from today, so that's the reason I picked it, but it doesn't have to be that date.
I'm good.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
1 o'clock, you said?
1 o'clock seems to work well.
And we will get all these documents out ahead of time and so everybody can
Yep,
review
yep,
them.
yep, yep,
It'd be
absolutely.
great.
So you need to wait and send out the ones that you amend on top of these, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do eight.
let's
yeah.
just do the ones amended, right? I think.
When you send that to me,
I'll shut up there, sorry.
Questions? Okay, I think I got everything, but I'll take it. All right. Mr. Allred.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, with all the items on our agenda having been completed, I would move that we adjourn our meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and participating.